Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Wine and Weeds. This one's a little different for a couple of reasons. Normally we like to start these off by talking about what we're drinking and then we head into the weeds. And the whole idea is that maybe you can make weeding a little bit more pleasant by having a little cocktail as part of that. But sometimes weeds need more attention that can happen with a cocktail in your hand. So today, first of all, it's only me on this episode, and two, this is a big enough topic, I think, to be all by itself, and it's too big of a weed to take on while drinking. So instead, we're going to just deal with the weed, and then we're going to make a very special drink that we will have earned after dealing with this weed. So this weed is the worst weed I have ever encountered in my life. It is a nightmare, and I brought this problem chiefly upon myself. So let me tell you a little bit about this weed. It's creeping bellflower. It's in the Campanula family, and it is an invasive species, listed as an invasive species, I believe, everywhere it's growing in the United States. It's non-native, and it takes over very quickly. The problem with this is that actually it has kind of a pretty flower. Nice big stalk, pretty little bellflowers on it, and that's what caught me in it. When I first moved to this house and started gardening here, and I knew very little. I had my mom come over, and we played the game of what's a weed, what's a plant, because you know how you just kind of watch your garden for that first year, and I was just trying to figure out what anything was. And I pointed that flower out to her. It was blooming at the time, and she said, "Oh, that's a terrible weed. You need to get rid of it." And in sort of a very smug way that maybe is familiar to some daughters and mothers, I said, "A weed is just a plant where you don't want it." Well, I learned my lesson. And she said, "Fine, it's your garden." Well, I learned a lesson on that one, because one creeping bellflower plant can produce up to 13,000 seeds. So it reseeds readily. On top of reseeding readily, it spreads aggressively by rhizomes. So you've got two methods for this thing to be taking over your world. And I will tell you that I've dealt with it since then, so the entire time I've lived here, and I've dealt with it in a variety of ways, which we'll get into. But I saw this plant take over my grandmother's entire yard. It was a very big city lot, and she was older and it just got out of control, and she wasn't able to keep up on it. It outcompeted the lawn. I mean, her whole lawn was creeping bellflower. Her whole garden was creeping bellflower. It took over. And that happened in not too many years, because up until she wasn't able to, she was pretty careful about maintaining her garden. So that is a cautionary tale, because this is a scary weed. In fact, creeping bellflower is so bad that there is a Facebook group dedicated to eradicating creeping bellflower. And maybe there are other weeds that have Facebook groups, but this is the first one I've come across. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you one way to get rid of it, which I think is going to show you why it's so hard to get rid of. So here's a nice little cluster of it. Now you'll rarely find just one little patch, because if you look farther this way, you'll see more of it sort of spread through here and spread through the little path. Look for those little heart-shaped leaves. It does make it very easily identifiable. And they almost have like a little serration on them. These are sort of moderately sized leaves, I would say. This one has obviously not flowered, so it's new this year. So this is the one we're going to get out of here. So when you're thinking about digging this, the key is you have to go deep, because these roots can be up to 18 inches long, and they can reach quite a bit away from the plant that you're actually digging up. A fork works best for this to start, because what you're trying not to do is break off the roots, as always. There's always going to be a little bit of breakage, but ideally you want to get the whole rhizome that's hiding under there. That's what you're really looking for, is a rhizome. So all these white roots are part of it. this is all the root system here, but we still haven't gotten to. So here's a rhizome, and they almost look like like carrots or parsnips, something like that, and they can be huge. So we're gonna just kind of gently shake this off and see if we can't get all the way to. And sometimes you'll end up following these quite a way. The size of that plant. It was only a clump about this big. These are all the roots that I pulled up from that one little part of this plant. So I think you can see why this can become problematic extremely quickly. Now, these are all these little wiry roots are all part of it. And what you really want to find is these guys. So these are the rhizomes, and this is where a lot of the energy is stored, that all of this comes off, this network of fine roots comes off of. Here's the actual, see, got something else in there too, but here's the actual greenery. There's some more, it's kind of all mixed up, the little leaves. But that was just from that one little area. So you can see if you have a bigger area of this, which everybody does, because if you have a little, you have a lot. This is a huge deal. By the way, only one thing to do with this. This goes into a garbage can. Don't even mess around with it. Put it in a garbage bag and throw it away. Okay, so let's talk about some other things you can do to get rid of this thing. Okay, so I think you can see that digging is a lot of work. In fact, the people on that Facebook group that I mentioned, there are people on there who are trying to eradicate it from a yard, and they are digging the entire yard down to 18 inches, sifting the soil, putting the soil back in, and then waiting at least a year before they plant anything to make sure more doesn't come up. That is a level of commitment that I don't personally have. I am in awe of, but I don't have that level of commitment. Wouldn't be practical for me. Probably isn't something that a lot of people are going to want to do. So what are some other ways we can deal with this? Well, digging is certainly one step in an effective method. I think you're going to have to take a multiple pronged approach to dealing with this weed, no matter what you do, because there is not one single thing that's going to solve the problem. You're going to have to keep after it repeatedly. Digging certainly helps. Flame weeding, one of my favorite methods of weeding, can help to deal with the new leaves that pop up when they're small. It's definitely not going to solve your root problem, but it will keep that plant from getting bigger, certainly from flowering, and it will just keep the problem to a minimum. At some point you can try, at some point you might suck enough energy out of those roots doing the flame weeding process that you could get on top of it, but keep in mind it's a constant repeated thing with that. And of course, if it's growing in your garden, it's difficult to flame weed because that's obviously non-selective. Okay, so then we get into smothering. Smothering doesn't work. In fact, that area that I was just digging in was heavily cardboarded and mulched, and clearly that didn't stop anything there. So because of those rhizomes, and they reach far, I think they can reach up to 10 feet from the mother plant. So, so smothering can help. Again, will not solve the problem, and it probably wouldn't be my first method of dealing with that particular weed. I have tried it in multiple areas of the garden and have had no measurable success with smothering. Okay, so lastly, we have to talk about chemical herbicides. This is an unpleasant topic. Nobody wants to resort to those things. Least of all me. I shy away from those things. I will say this, I believe, is the only weed I have ever treated with Roundup in my yard. And the way I do it is very specific. I paint it on. So first of all, let's just talk a little bit about safety. If you guys are going to use any sort of herbicide, please, please, please read the label very carefully and take the right steps to protect yourself. These are dangerous chemicals. I think we've heard about some of the lawsuits that are involved with this and what can happen with exposure to these. So protect yourself, do the right thing, be smart about it. So What I do with this, though, is I paint it on. So I will pour some, now keep in mind, we're talking gloves, we're talking sometimes a respirator, although when I'm not spraying it, I wouldn't probably do that, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't hurt to do it. I pour it into a little cup. I take one of those small styrofoam brushes that you can pick up at any hardware store, and I actually paint it on each little leaf. It takes forever. Done, in spring when these are first coming up, and then repeat it again, this actually is a pretty effective method. I did eradicate this from a bed on the west side of my house using that method repeatedly, probably 3 applications over the course of one season. But obviously non-selective, you have to deal with all those things. But for me, that's actually the method that I found to be most effective. Now, if you look at one of the fact sheets I put below from the Wisconsin DNR, they're saying this is like 50% effective. They actually rate pretty much every method of dealing with it at about 50%. So just know you're always going to have to come back. You're going to have to stay on top of it. And there's no easy fix for this one. So I know that a lot of you have this weed, and I know that because many of you have asked me to talk about it on a Wine and Weeds. And I wish I wasn't able to help you out because I wish I wouldn't have it in the first place. But I do. So here's the things to know about, how to get rid of it. Just know there's no quick fix for this one. You're going to have to just dig in. You're probably going to have to use multiple methods, and you're going to have to stay on top of it. At the very least, if you see those flowers, get them out of there as soon as you see them coming. Because at least you've reduced the ability of it to spread by seed. You got a lot of work ahead of you anyways, but get rid of it, because once it starts seeding, that's when you get that double effect of it spreading, and things go bad real quickly. All right, so that's a whole bunch of bad news. So let's move on away from horrible invasive weeds, and let's talk about the right drink to soothe ourselves with after this. And should be something that's sort of a treat, a little bit boozy, and has a great story behind it. So let's go make that drink. So I told you that we deserve a bit of a treat, a special drink after this. And that means we're talking about an ice cream drink. So before I get into this very special ice cream drink, which is possibly one you've never had, because this is not your basic grasshopper or Brandy Alexander, I will just tell you that in college, you will be unsurprised to know that I worked as a bartender at a local bar and restaurant. And there were multiple restaurants in the same building, and there was one that was kind of an open air thing that was more casual dining. And the managers there pretty much turned that whole place over to all the college kids who were working there, and they left all the professional wait staff in the more fine dining area. So the college kids were running the show up there. And we had a little issue with ice cream drinks because the waitresses loved to sell them because they were very expensive and it brought up the bill. The bartenders hated to make them because what happens is once one person sees an ice cream drink go by in a restaurant, everybody else orders them. And the next thing you know, you are at the bar making ice cream drinks for like 2 hours. Ice cream drinks take forever to make. You have to basically not pay attention to your customers who are at the bar because we were doing table service and bar service simultaneously. So sometimes we would lie and say, oh, there's no ice cream. We can't make ice cream drinks. So anyway, that's the little secret. If you've ever been told at a restaurant that they can't make an ice cream drink, it's probably because the bartender just doesn't want to. Okay, now this ice cream drink, this is called a Hummer. And the story behind this drink is almost as good as the drink. This drink was invented by a bartender named Jerome Adams at Bayview Yacht Club in Detroit in 1968. The history of this is well established because this drink is sort of famous, certainly through Michigan, and has been written up in many other places. So it's well known, but Jerome needs credit for this. Now, Jerome died a few years ago, but the drink lives on as a fabulous drink. It has sort of, interestingly, this drink sort of spread originally from that bar through kind of the sailing set and kind of made its way into everywhere else, and now it's out there. But this is the Hummer. So this is a blended drink, obviously, so you got to pull, if you're like me and you haven't used your blender in a lot of years, you got to pull out the blender, wash it out. So we're going to start with 1.5 ounces of white rum. Bacardi is the preference here. That's how Jerome made it, and that is how we will make it. Next up is 1.5 ounces of Kahlúa. Kahlúa, if you haven't tried it, is a coffee and rum liqueur. It smells really good. Then 2 scoops of ice cream. I would say, but vanilla ice cream. I would say get the best vanilla ice cream you can find. By the way, I did just read an America's Test Kitchen review that said Ben & Jerry's vanilla was the best. We can't find any Ben & Jerry's vanilla around us. They only sell the flavors. We're going with Haagen-Dazs, which is sort of a classic. And I don't really have a proper scooper, so I don't really know exactly what 2 scoops is going to be, but we're going to eyeball it here. I worked as a bartender in college, but I never worked as an ice cream scooper. Those people have great wrist strength. And then you want about, the recipe says 1/2 cup of crushed ice. I just put the ice cubes in whole. It's about 5 ice cubes from a freezer that has, you know, an ice maker. Okay, now we gotta blend this up. Okay, so I don't have sort of a proper parfait type glass. So I was going to use a Pilsner glass, but instead I decided to switch to your martini glass. Little chunk of ice in there, no biggie. It's going to be cool and frothy and smooth and the best thing you've ever had. Oh, God. Dangerously good. This drink is so good, you could really get yourself in trouble with these. So the Hummer is exactly the drink that you deserve after dealing with creeping bellflower, whether you've started to eradicate it or whether you've just discovered that you have it. You're probably going to need 1, maybe 2 of these. All right, enjoy. I promise you it's worth it. I'll put the recipe in the description because that's how good it is. All right, I hope you guys found this helpful. Whether you're doing the drink or you're doing the weed or maybe you're doing both. Have a great day in your garden. We'll see you soon.